What is going on, everybody? Been a diehard Pistons fan since 2003 and starting to get very optimistic about this Pistons team. The Detroit Pistons are 500, 18 and 18. First time they have had a record that good this late in the season for quite some time. There's a ton of NBA fringe stars in trade rumors at the moment, and Jaden Ivey just suffered an injury that's going to keep him out for multiple months. Those three things together has created the perfect storm for the Pistons to be included and involved in a ton of trade rumors, some from even the national NBA media. I could always count on people in the Pistons fan base throwing ideas out and seeing if any of them stick, but for once in a long time, a lot of these rumors have came from the national side of the NBA media, so I figured it would be worth talking about in a video. In this video, we're going to talk about three different players that have been kind of tossed around with talks and the Pistons over the past week or so, and just kind of give my general thoughts. And towards the back half of the video, going to talk about just the deadline and everything trade related in general and my perspective on it. So the first one is Jimmy Butler. Here are the facts of the Jimmy Butler situation or kind of case. Jimmy Butler, you all know who he is. If you follow the NBA, it's impossible not to. The dude is 35 years old. He is on the last year of his deal. He has a player option that he could potentially opt into, but it sounds like he's going to opt out, and things are at a breaking point with Jimmy Butler in Miami. I'm sure you all have heard the stories. He has been suspended by the Heat for 7 games. He almost certainly won't be returning to the Miami Heat to play any more games, so he's going to be out of town soon. Some of the teams that have been rumored for him to be a destination for, the Warriors, the Grizzlies, those names have been thrown out there, but a couple people have mentioned the Pistons as well. Here's the thing about Jimmy Butler. I don't think he wants to be here, for one. For number two, if we were to trade for him, then we have to talk about extending him. And those two things together kind of make it a not even possible situation in my mind. This is a failure to launch, in my opinion. I don't really think there's that much teeth to this because it just doesn't pass the smell test. Yes, it would be cool to have Jimmy Butler on this team for a short period of time, I suppose, but in no real world does it make any sense for a team like the Pistons, whose best player is 23 years old, to go get a guy who is 35 years old looking for a max extension. That just doesn't make any sense, really, when you actually break it down like that. And then you factor in the fact that Jimmy almost certainly doesn't want to be here. It's just a disaster waiting to happen. We can look back on trades like the Blake Griffin trade, and that is like a version of this, but much more digestible and at least able to make some sense out of. I feel like if you're a Pistons fan, talking about the potential of Jimmy Butler getting added onto this team, you really haven't thought it through because it just doesn't make that much sense. There's really no real world where it would ever make sense for the Pistons, whose best player is 23 years old, to pursue a 35-year-old, especially when they want a max contract. I also think the Pistons are really leaning into Cade Cunningham and his leadership skills. And Jimmy Butler is just an alpha. That is his personality. If he were to hypothetically be on this team with Cade, instantly he's going to want to become the guy. And not to get too much into the kind of psychoactive side of sports, but that could cause problems as well. So we're going to move on and talk about Bradley Beal because I think that is a failure to launch. And I don't think it's too different for Bradley Beal. This is another name that I've seen thrown out by non-Pistons fans about a potential move for the Pistons. The Phoenix Suns are officially on blow it up watch. Matt Ishbia bought that team and probably made way too many moves, way too many times over and over again, way too fast. Now they have a sticky situation on their hands. This is also the same thing. It's just a failure to launch trade idea that I think has no teeth to it that has been thrown out by the national media for whatever reason, about the Pistons being a third team and a bigger trade. They could potentially even have Jimmy Butler in it, and then Beal gets sent to the Pistons. First things first, Bradley Beal is one of the few players in the NBA that has a no-trade clause. I doubt Bradley Beal wants to be here. Just like Jimmy Butler, he is older than our core. He's not as old as Jimmy Butler, but he's older. He also has 3 years left on what is a max contract for a guy who just got sent to the bench. So in no real world does it make any sense for the Pistons to go after this dude, because whatever the assets are that could be attached to him to make him worthwhile to come over wouldn't matter anyways, because our books would be so tied up with Bradley Beal. All we could do is just use the picks that I guess they attached to try and draft more players, and then have no money when it's time to pay Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Ausar Thompson, Holland. All of that doesn't even make sense if Bradley Beal didn't have this no trade clause. I don't think there's any real world where Bradley Beal would want to come to Detroit. I don't think that he is a fit with the core. I don't think that he's a fit with what the Pistons have done historically, being a defensive first team. It just doesn't make any real sense. And I don't think that there's enough assets in this world that you could attach to him to make it make sense. Even hypothetically speaking, the Suns have what, like their 2031 pick left or something like that. If they were to attach that and send something else out to get more assets to attach to send back to us, like if you sent us like 2 first-round picks, it's still not worth it to take this contract. And you're also not going to convince him to waive his no trade clause to come to Detroit. So I don't understand why that name has been thrown out. But the next one and the last one is way more realistic, and that's Marcus Smart. I have seen a couple of these mock trades that include both of the 2 players that we already talked about, Bradley Beal and Jimmy Butler, and is a part of a 3-team deal. Marcus Smart gets kicked back to the Pistons for a guy like Simone Fontecchio or Tim Hardaway Jr. This one at least makes sense, right? Losing Jaden Ivey, I totally understand if you want to try and go get a backup point guard to fill in the minutes when Cade's not on the floor. That makes sense to me, even though I've talked about it in a whole other dedicated video about Marcus Sasser. I don't think we need to do it. But if they wanted to do that, I guess, sure, fine, I'm okay with it. If the Pistons wanted to move off Simone Fontecchio or Tim Hardaway Jr. and potentially get an asset back for it to make the money work for 2 other teams to do something, and Marcus Smart comes along with it to kind of fill in these minutes while Jaden Ivey is out, I mean, I guess I'm not going to jump up and down out of my seat because it happened. Matter of fact, I'd rather it not happen, but I wouldn't be upset if it does happen, and it at least makes somewhat sense in my head, unlike the other 2 players that I talked about who have been getting mentioned as potential Pistons. So all in all, I just don't think the Pistons need to make any moves right now. If they wanted to go be a 3rd team in a bigger trade and take back a player to gain an asset or something like that, sure, go ahead. If that means moving off Tim Hardaway Jr. or Simone Fontecchio or something, look, I'm not going to be stoked about it, but don't think it would really change a whole lot in the bigger picture long term, even though I'd rather not move off of any of those guys, because it feels like what we're building right now is special. I almost didn't want to say it, but it does feel like that. It really does. Watching these last couple of games, it feels like for the first time in a long time, the atmosphere within this organization is great. And I really don't want to tweak with that unless we absolutely have to, or the assets coming back are so good that we can't say no. So that's how I feel on this right now. I know that we've got like another month until the trade deadline, and I'm sure I'll probably have to make a few more trade videos. But as of right now, as of today, where I stand, I want us to sit on our hands. And if we do anything, I want it to be very minor, and all I want is just a few assets back to take on money without having to ditch anybody in our rotation that is currently making an impact for the Pistons that are 500 for the first time in a long time. So let me know what you guys think, and we'll catch up soon.